The moving truck was still running when the police cruiser pulled up. Not 5 minutes after I'd arrived at my inherited lake cabin, a perfectly manicured woman in designer heels was already storming across the dock, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, officer, he's here. The military vagrant I told you about." Neighbors gathered on their porches to watch the show as the cop approached with that look, the one that said this call was expected. "Sir, I need you to vacate the premises immediately. There's a restraining order." Standing there, humiliated in front of an entire community, I watched my childhood sanctuary being stolen by some HOA president who thought she could intimidate a veteran. She had no idea she just picked a fight with the wrong soldier. My name is Steele, and after 22 years serving my country, I thought I'd earned the right to a peaceful retirement. The lake cabin had been in my family since 1965 when my uncle Jasper, a Korean War veteran, built it board by board. Every summer of my childhood was spent on that creaky dock, learning to tie military knots and listening to war stories. When he passed last spring, he left me the only thing that mattered, our family's slice of paradise. I'd planned to spend my retirement there, fixing boats for the locals and finally reading all those books I'd carried through 3 deployments. But Willowbrook Lake wasn't the quiet fishing community Uncle Jasper had known. Starting around 2000, developers began dropping $500,000 McMansions that looked like they'd been ordered from a suburban catalog. The original families still lived in modest cabins along the shoreline, but they were being slowly surrounded. That's when she arrived. Delilah Thornbridge swept into our community in 2018 like a perfectly manicured hurricane. She'd married Rex Thornbridge, a local contractor who'd gotten rich during the housing boom, and together they'd purchased the biggest lakefront mansion money could buy. Within 6 months, she'd gotten herself elected HOA president with promises of elevating our community standards. The first shot came exactly 1 week before my planned move-in. A certified letter arrived, thick as a legal brief. The return address read Willowbrook Lake Homeowners Association in gold embossed letters. "Dear Mr. Steele," it began, dripping with false politeness. "Your property has been identified as non-compliant with current community aesthetic standards." The list was longer than my last deployment orders: new roof, updated siding, professional landscaping, dock repairs, window replacements. The estimated cost, $15,000 for a cabin that Uncle Jasper had maintained perfectly for 57 years. I called the number immediately. "Ma'am, this is Steele. I received your letter about, oh yes, the military property." She cut me off like I was some kind of disease. "I'm sure you understand, Mr. Steele, that we simply cannot allow substandard properties to drag down our community's investment value. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable in one of those veteran housing developments across town. The improvements are non-negotiable," she continued. "Failure to complete them within 30 days will result in legal action to prevent occupancy." The line went dead. Delilah didn't waste time. 3 days after our phone call, a process server showed up with papers that made my deployment orders look like love letters: emergency injunction, immediate cease and desist, violation of community aesthetic covenants. She'd hired Blackstone and Associates, the kind of law firm that charges $400 an hour just to answer the phone. But here's the thing about 22 years in the military. You learn that the enemy's first move is rarely their best move. So while Delilah was spending her husband's money on lawyers, I was spending my morning at the county courthouse. The courthouse basement smelled like old paper and broken dreams, but it was also where public records lived. "Can I help you, honey?" The clerk looked like she'd been filing documents since the Carter administration. "Yes, ma'am. I need to research property deeds and HOA formation documents for Willowbrook Lake." 4 hours later, I struck gold. Uncle Jasper's original deed recorded in 1965 showed clear ownership with no restrictions, no covenants, and definitely no HOA oversight because the HOA didn't exist until 2003, 38 years after Uncle Jasper had already established his property rights. The legal principle was simple: grandfathered property rights supersede any HOA rules created after the fact. But the real treasure was buried deeper. Rex Thornbridge's construction company had been awarded an $80,000 contract for HOA road repairs in 2022. No competitive bidding, no other estimates, just a rubber stamp approval from his wife's HOA board. This wasn't just about my cabin. This was about systematic corruption. That's when I met my first ally. Mavis Kettleworth was sitting in the parking lot struggling to get her walker out of an ancient Honda Civic. At 78, she moved like someone who'd been fighting bureaucracy longer than I'd been alive. "You're Jasper's boy," she said. "Heard that Thornbridge woman is giving you trouble." Mavis had been a paralegal for 43 years before she retired and knew every property dispute in this county's history. "Your uncle was a founding member of this community," Mavis said, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "That deed you found? It's worth more than any HOA covenant. But you're going to need help navigating the legal system." That evening, I spread Uncle Jasper's Purple Heart in my research across his kitchen table. Delilah had gotten a temporary restraining order that prevented me from moving in until a court hearing 3 weeks away. 3 weeks of motel bills that would burn through my savings faster than diesel through a Humvee. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Heard you're causing trouble for some very important people. Might want to reconsider your position." A friend. I'd been threatened by actual terrorists. Some HOA president's anonymous text messages weren't going to make me lose sleep. But they did tell me something important. Delilah was scared enough to resort to intimidation. And scared enemies make mistakes. 2 weeks into my forced exile at the Lakeview extended stay, Delilah made her next move. An emergency community meeting flyer appeared in every mailbox. The community center smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and decades of potluck dinners. Delilah stood at the front, armed with a laptop and presentation skills that could sell ice to Eskimos. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began. "We're facing a crisis that threatens everything we've built together." Her PowerPoint presentation was titled "Maintaining Our Investment Value, a Community Strategy." Each slide was more ridiculous than the last: property values, aesthetic standards, security enhancement initiatives. "Which brings me to our immediate security concerns," Delilah clicked to a slide. "I'm proposing a special assessment of $25,000 per property to fund these critical improvements." The room erupted in nervous coughing. Harold Finch, the HOA treasurer, shifted in his seat like someone had set his pants on fire. I'd come to this meeting in full dress uniform. A little psychological warfare never hurt. Before we vote on any assessments, I stood up, letting my voice carry the authority of 2 decades giving orders. "I'd like to request inspection of the HOA's financial records. As property owners, we have that right." Actually, Mavis's walker tapped against the floor as she rose. Any property owner in the HOA boundary has legal right to inspect financial records with proper notice. Robert's Rules of Order, which this organization claims to follow. The hidden agenda started becoming clear as Delilah stumbled through her response. Rex's company would handle all the security work. The same Rex whose previous contract had somehow cost $80,000 for road repairs that nobody could find. When pressed about the books, Harold mumbled something about recent transitions and updating systems. After the meeting, 3 residents approached me in the parking lot. "That was brave in there," whispered Dorothy Milhouse, a retired teacher. "Some of us have been wondering about those finances for a while." "Rex's work crews show up, make a lot of noise, then disappear," added Frank Morrison. "Half the time we can't figure out what they actually did." The third conspirator was Janet Polk, whose property bordered mine. "Delilah came to our house last month, very friendly, asking if we might be interested in selling. Said she had investors who'd pay above market value for the right properties." The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't about community standards or security. This was about forcing out fixed-income residents and flipping their properties to vacation rental investors. Uncle Jasper's cabin wasn't just in the way. It was the final piece Delilah needed to control the entire lakefront. That night, back in my depressing motel room, I spread the evidence across the polyester bedspread. HOA financial discrepancies, Rex's no-bid contracts, Delilah's mysterious investors, anonymous threatening texts. I was fighting an organized corruption scheme with my military pension and whatever free legal help Mavis could provide. But I'd learned something important tonight. Delilah's support wasn't as solid as she pretended. Cracks were showing in her perfect community facade. Monday morning brought harassment that would have impressed even the most creative drill sergeants. An official county vehicle was parked in Uncle Jasper's driveway. A building inspector with a clipboard and the expression of someone doing a favor for a friend. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back," the inspector said. Anonymous complaint about structural integrity. Very serious violations. The violations he cited would have been funny if they weren't costing me my inheritance: unsafe dock pilings, non-compliant electrical systems, questionable foundation integrity. The repair estimates, $40,000. Coincidentally, Rex's business card was clipped to the citation. That afternoon, I drove straight to the VA benefits office where I met Linda Martinez, a caseworker who actually understood that veterans deserve more than just lip service. "Mr. Steele, you may qualify for several programs you're not using," she said. Disabled veteran property tax exemptions, VA home improvement loans at 0% interest, and something I think you'll find very interesting: historical preservation assistance. The historical preservation angle was like finding water in the desert. Uncle Jasper's cabin, built in 1965 by a Korean War veteran using traditional techniques, could qualify for protected status. And historical designation would make forced modifications illegal. But the real breakthrough came when Mavis called that evening. "Honey, you need to get over here right now. Dorothy Milhouse found something in her late husband's papers that's going to change everything." Dorothy's kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and vindication. Spread across her dining table were meeting minutes, financial records, and correspondence dating back 3 years, a paper trail of corruption that would make forensic accountants weep with joy. "My Harold was meticulous about documentation," Dorothy explained. "He attended every HOA meeting, kept copies of every financial report, recorded every suspicious decision. The pattern was crystal clear." Rex's company had been awarded 17 different contracts over 3 years, totaling nearly $300,000, road repairs that were never completed, landscaping projects that existed only on paper, emergency maintenance that somehow always required Rex's specific expertise. But the smoking gun was a recorded phone conversation from last month. "Harold always kept his phone on speaker because of his hearing," Dorothy said, pressing play on an ancient cassette recorder. Delilah's voice filled the kitchen. "Harold, I need you to adjust the books before the annual meeting. Move the Rex payments to different categories. Make them look like legitimate maintenance. I'll make it worth your while. 10,000 cash." Harold's response was barely audible. "Mrs. Thornbridge, I can't. That's not legal." "It's not illegal if nobody finds out," Delilah replied. "Think about your wife's medical bills, Harold." The sound of gravel outside interrupted our planning session. Through Dorothy's window, we watched the inspector's truck pull into Uncle Jasper's driveway again, this time accompanied by Rex's work crew. 20 minutes later, they drove away, leaving behind what looked like an accidental break in the main water pipe. My phone buzzed, noticed additional water damage during follow-up inspection. Afraid this raises the repair estimate significantly. These people weren't just corrupt. They were criminals actively sabotaging my property. Dorothy's hands trembled as she pulled out a manila folder. "Harold found this in your uncle's papers when he was helping clean out the cabin last spring." The document inside made my heart stop. Original community charter dated 1965, signed by 12 founding families, including Jasper Steele. "Look at Section 7, Mavis said. Water rights. The founding families had negotiated perpetual lake access rights for themselves and their heirs, completely separate from any future property regulations. But the real bombshell was in the fine print. Any major development affecting lake access required unanimous consent from all founding family representatives. "Sweet mother of pearl," I whispered, using Uncle Jasper's favorite expression. "She's been trying to steal my property because she needs my permission for their development." Dorothy nodded grimly. Harold suspected as much. "Rex has been buying up waterfront properties all around the lake, but he can't develop the marina without controlling every foot of shoreline. Your uncle's cabin was the final piece. The power dynamic had just flipped. Delilah wasn't just some power-hungry HOA president. She was a desperate woman sitting on a $300,000 investment that was worthless without my cooperation. How much has she already spent? I asked. Mavis pulled out another folder. Permits, environmental studies, architectural plans, investor presentations. Harold estimated she's already invested close to $300,000, plus whatever Rex borrowed against his business to buy the adjacent properties. My phone buzzed with a text from Rex himself. Heard you're being unreasonable about some paperwork. Bad things happen to unreasonable people. They're getting desperate, Dorothy warned. Harold was genuinely scared toward the end. An old veteran living alone, standing in the way of a multi-million-dollar development project. Uncle Jasper's sudden heart attack last spring was starting to feel less like natural causes. The war room smelled like fresh coffee in righteous anger. Mavis's kitchen table had been transformed into mission control, covered with documents, maps, and evidence. My team was small but mighty, a retired paralegal who knew every legal loophole, a teacher who documented everything, and a secret weapon I'd just recruited. Chief Warrant Officer Maria Santos arrived in civilian clothes, but she still moved like active duty. We'd served together in Afghanistan. Let me get this straight, Santos said, studying the evidence. HOA president embezzles funds, husband gets no-bid contracts, they threaten residents who don't comply, and now they're trying to force you out to complete an illegal development project? The strategy unfolded like a textbook operation, 4 fronts of attack. Legal front, file complaints with the State Attorney General's office, request forensic audit of HOA finances, invoke historical preservation laws, activate founding family water rights to block the marina development. Santos pulled out her laptop. Financial warfare is my specialty. Financial front, Brock applies for VA home improvement loan, documents property tax exemptions, traces Rex's shell company structure, identifies investor funding sources. Community front, organize Heritage Day to celebrate founding families, invite local media to cover historical preservation story, build coalition of residents tired of intimidation, document pattern of harassment. Intelligence front, continuous surveillance of Rex's construction activities, monitor HOA meeting attendance, track property purchases. They're going to escalate when they realize we're organizing, Santos warned. Let them escalate, I said. Every move they make gives us more evidence. Luther Blackwood arrived, Uncle Jasper's fishing buddy who'd been documenting everything for 3 years. Rex's crews work fast and sloppy, Luther reported. I've got photos of every shortcut, every code violation. The sound of gravel announced another visitor. Harold Finch shuffled up the walkway, looking like a man carrying the weight of the world. I can't do this anymore, he said. She's threatening my wife's medical coverage if I don't cooperate. We're going to protect you, Santos assured him. But we need you to keep playing along for just a little longer. The plan was ambitious, 2 weeks of preparation, community building, and evidence gathering. Then a very public confrontation that would expose everything in front of witnesses, media, and law enforcement. Think it'll work? Dorothy asked. Santos smiled with the confidence of someone who'd planned successful operations in much more dangerous circumstances. Ma'am, we've got legal authority, financial leverage, community support, and documented evidence of criminal activity. Plus, we're fighting for something that actually matters. What's that? Mavis asked. Home, I said, looking out at the lake. We're fighting for home. Delilah's counterattack began with a knock on my motel room door at 6 a.m. A weasel-faced man in a cheap suit flashed a private investigator license. Mr. Steele, I'm conducting a background investigation on behalf of concerned community members. Mind if I ask you a few questions about your military service? Specifically any incidents involving anger management, substance abuse, or interactions with military police. I smiled with the patience Uncle Jasper had taught me. You can request my service record through the Freedom of Information Act. Have a nice day. The real escalation came that afternoon when Harold called, his voice shaking. They offered me $10,000 to destroy the financial records. Cash in a brown envelope like some kind of movie. Did you record it? Santos asked. We'd given Harold a digital recorder disguised as a hearing aid. Every word. But that's not the worst part. Rex was there when she made the offer. He said if I didn't cooperate, my wife might have trouble getting her prescriptions filled. Said pharmacy computers can be very unreliable. That night, the sabotage escalated beyond broken water pipes. The sound of shattering glass woke me at 2 a.m. Uncle Jasper's cabin windows, the original hand-blown panes he'd installed in 1965, lay in sparkling pieces across the front porch. Spray paint spelled military scum across the siding in letters that dripped like blood. But Rex had made a crucial mistake. The trail cameras Santos had installed caught everything in high-definition detail. Got him, Santos said, reviewing the footage. Clear face shot, license plate, even audio of him laughing about teaching that soldier boy a lesson. But Delilah's final gambit showed just how desperate she'd become. Mr. Steele, the voice on the phone belonged to someone from the VA Medical Center. We've received some concerning reports about your mental health status. Anonymous calls suggesting you might be a danger to yourself or others. Someone had weaponized the VA's suicide prevention protocols against me, claim a veteran is unstable, trigger mandatory evaluations, create a paper trail that suggests mental health issues. Ma'am, I'll be happy to come in for evaluation, but I'll be bringing my attorney and documentation showing this is harassment related to a property dispute. They're scared, Santos said that evening. Scared people make desperate moves. This isn't just about money anymore, I replied. They're trying to destroy my reputation, my mental health record, my ability to function as a veteran in civilian society. Then we accelerate the timeline, Mavis said. Dorothy's been fielding calls all day from other residents. Rex's crew slashed 3 more sets of tires and someone left threatening notes for anyone who attended our heritage meeting. They're terrorizing the entire community, Dorothy added. Mrs. Patterson called crying. They told her the HOA might need to reassess her property for compliance issues if she keeps associating with troublemakers. Time to end this, I said, pulling out my phone. Time to call the police chief. Police Chief Maxwell Henderson had the kind of voice that commanded respect without raising volume. When I called requesting a meeting about organized criminal activity targeting veterans and elderly residents, he agreed to see me immediately. His office smelled like black coffee and dedication, walls lined with commendations spanning 3 decades of public service. Mr. Steele, I've been hearing your name around town, he said. Some folks painting you as a troublemaker, others saying you're fighting corruption. Which one is it? I placed the evidence folders on his desk, financial records, recorded conversations, photographs of vandalism, screenshots of threatening messages. Chief, I'm a retired master sergeant who just wants to live peacefully in his uncle's cabin. But I've stumbled onto something bigger. Henderson's expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. The recorded bribery attempt made him lean forward. The photos of Rex vandalizing my property made his jaw tighten. The documentation of threats against elderly residents made him reach for his phone. This isn't just HOA corruption, he said finally. This is racketeering. But before we could plan our next move, Delilah launched her most desperate gambit yet. The emergency HOA meeting notice arrived by certified mail, immediate vote, removal of dangerous individual from community property. The meeting was scheduled for that Friday night. The language was pure character assassination, recent incidents involving property destruction, harassment of residents, and documented mental health concerns require immediate action to protect our families and property values. Santos found me that afternoon, her laptop open to Facebook pages that made my blood pressure spike. Someone had created fake social media accounts posting inflammatory content under my name, photos of my cabin with captions about military compounds and veteran extremists, fabricated quotes about teaching these civilians a lesson. Professional job, Santos said grimly. Whoever did this knows social media manipulation. Luther Blackwood climbed out of his truck, moving faster than I'd seen him move in months. They came to my house, he said. Rex and 2 other men said I needed to reconsider my loyalties or find somewhere else to live. Luther smiled and pulled out his cell phone. 43 years in quality control taught me to document everything. Got the whole conversation, including Rex saying, quote, accidents happen to old men who don't mind their own business. That evening, the community center filled with tension thick enough to cut with a combat knife. Delilah had orchestrated the seating like a courtroom, her supporters in front, opposition relegated to the back. Harold sat at the treasurer's table, looking like a man facing a firing squad.
"Thank you all for coming," Delilah began.
"Tonight we address a serious threat to our community's safety and values." She prepared a presentation that would have impressed propaganda ministers, carefully edited photos of my cabin made to look like a military compound, screenshots of the fake social media posts presented as evidence of my extremist views, even a letter from a concerned VA counselor suggesting I was struggling with adjustment issues. But Delilah had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated how many people were tired of living in fear. When she called for questions, Dorothy Milhouse stood up with the authority of someone who'd controlled classrooms full of teenagers for 40 years. "Mrs. Thornbridge, before we vote on anything, I'd like the community to hear some recordings that Harold Finch provided to me.
Recordings of conversations between you and various residents that I think everyone should know about." The color drained from Delilah's face. "That's private conversation. You can't."
"Actually," Mavis interrupted, "threatening community members and attempting to bribe officials are criminal acts, not private conversations." Rex stepped forward from the back wall, his face flushed with anger and panic.
"Nobody wants to hear your lies, old woman."
That's when Chief Henderson walked through the front door, uniform pressed and badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Behind him walked two deputies and a woman carrying a briefcase that screamed federal authority. The room went silent except for the sound of folding chairs creaking as every head turned toward the entrance.
"Game over."
"Ladies and gentlemen," Henderson's voice carried the weight of 3 decades protecting and serving. "I apologize for interrupting your meeting, but recent events require immediate law enforcement attention." "Chief Henderson, this is highly irregular," Delilah managed.
"This is a private HOA matter." "Ma'am, racketeering, embezzlement, and criminal intimidation aren't private matters," Henderson interrupted. "They're felonies." The woman with the briefcase stepped forward. "Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Financial Crimes Unit.
We've been investigating reports of organized fraud targeting homeowners associations throughout the region.
Mr. Steele's evidence has been very helpful."
I stood up slowly, letting my dress uniform speak before my words did.
"Folks, I didn't ask for this fight.
I just wanted to honor my Uncle Jasper's memory by living peacefully in the cabin he built with his own hands.
But when criminals threaten our community, veterans don't stand down."
Before anyone leaves, I continued, pulling out the original 1965 community charter. "There's something this community needs to know about their legal rights." Delilah's gasp was audible as she recognized the document that destroyed her entire scheme. This charter, signed by the founding families, including my Uncle Jasper, grants water rights that supersede any HOA authority.
"Mrs. Thornbridge's marina development has been illegal from day one." "That's impossible," Rex snarled.
"You researched everything except the original founding documents," Agent Chen said calmly.
"Documents that show your planned development violates federal waterway regulations, state environmental laws, and the original community charter."
Harold Finch suddenly found his courage, standing up at the treasurer's table with shaking hands but steady voice.
"I have recordings," he announced. "Recordings of Mrs. Thornbridge offering me bribes to falsify HOA financial records. Recordings of threats against my wife's medical care if I didn't cooperate."
The sound of his phone connecting to the community center's sound system filled the room. Delilah's voice crystal clear. "Harold, I need you to adjust the books.
Move the Rex payments to different categories.
I'll make it worth your while.
10,000 cash."
You could have heard a pin drop. Then the murmurs started building like a wave as residents realized they'd been living under a criminal enterprise disguised as community leadership. "Furthermore," I said, "we have video evidence of Mr. Thornbridge vandalizing my property, photographic evidence of financial fraud totaling over $300,000, and documentation of systematic intimidation against elderly and veteran residents." Rex made his move then, pushing toward the exit, but Chief Henderson's voice stopped him cold.
"Rex Thornbridge, you're under arrest for vandalism, criminal intimidation, and conspiracy to commit fraud."
The sound of handcuffs clicking echoed through the silent room.
Delilah tried one last desperate play. This is harassment.
We're legitimate business people trying to improve our community.
Ma'am, Agent Chen interrupted. Embezzling HOA funds, threatening elderly residents, and filing false police reports aren't business improvements. They're federal crimes. Chief Henderson stepped forward and something remarkable happened.
This man who'd served our community for 30 years came to attention and rendered a perfect military salute. Master Sergeant Steele, on behalf of this community and in honor of your uncle's service, thank you for your courage in exposing this criminal conspiracy.
The room erupted. Residents who'd been terrorized for months began applauding.
Elderly neighbors who'd been afraid to speak up found their voices. Delilah Thornbridge, Henderson continued, you're under arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy, and violation of fair housing laws. As the handcuffs clicked into place, I looked around the room at faces that had been marked by fear for too long.
Uncle Jasper would have been proud.
Sometimes standing up to bullies does more than protect yourself.
It protects an entire community. Folks, I said as the criminals were led away, let's go home. For the first time in months, that actually meant something.
Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful over Willowbrook Lake, and for the first time in months, I woke up in Uncle Jasper's cabin. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with pine needles drifting through windows that community volunteers had replaced the day before. The community rally that followed Delilah's arrest was something Uncle Jasper would have loved. Neighbors who'd been afraid to speak for months emerged carrying tools, paint, and casseroles. Luther Blackwood directed traffic while Mavis organized work crews with the efficiency of a retired paralegal who'd spent 40 years managing chaos. Jasper's boy shouldn't have to fix this mess alone, Dorothy announced. By sunset, every trace of vandalism had been erased. The legal aftermath was swift and satisfying. Rex's construction empire collapsed when forensic accountants discovered he'd been running a shell game with borrowed money and fraudulent contracts. 3 years in federal prison, plus restitution to every homeowner he'd cheated. Delilah faced 5 years for her role in the conspiracy, plus permanent disbarment from any HOA leadership position. But the real victory was what we built from the wreckage. The Uncle Jasper Memorial Scholarship launched 3 months later, funded by recovered HOA money and community donations. Every year it helps military children attend college, honoring the values Uncle Jasper had fought for in Korea and lived by on this lake. The annual Veterans Day fishing tournament became Willowbrook Lake's biggest community event, drawing participants from 3 counties and raising money for veteran services. Chief Henderson always serves as honorary starter, and the winning trophy is engraved with Uncle Jasper's favorite saying, "Patience catches more fish than noise." My boat repair business grew organically from helping neighbors fix engines and restore docks. The workshop where Uncle Jasper taught me to build things with my hands became a gathering place where stories get told and problems get solved. The combat anxiety that had followed me home from 3 deployments began healing in ways the VA hospital never achieved. Community support, meaningful work, and the peace that comes from protecting something worth protecting, those proved better medicine than any prescription. The new HOA board, elected by actual residents instead of installed by developers, operates with complete transparency, monthly financial reports, competitive bidding for all contracts, and a simple rule: no one gets to intimidate anybody. 6 months after that nightmare meeting, I received a letter from the State Attorney General's office. Our case had inspired legislation strengthening veteran housing protections and HOA oversight requirements. Sometimes one person's fight for justice ripples outward in ways you never expect. Uncle Jasper's Purple Heart sits in a place of honor on the mantle, surrounded by photos of the extended family this community has become. There's talk of other veterans facing similar battles and developments across the state. A network is forming, people who understand that standing up to bullies isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about protecting everyone who comes after. Your turn. Share your HOA nightmare story in the comments below. You're not alone, and together we can fight back against corruption and intimidation. Welcome to Willowbrook Lake, where veterans and neighbors look out for each other. If you enjoyed today's drama, hit like, comment on your favorite part below, and subscribe so you'll be the first to catch our next HOA showdown.